Hi, I'm back. Okay, we're going to finish our discussion. We're probably going to have a couple, this video and then another video after this, and we will continue the discussion about diversity. And I'm going to pull up where we left off and go straight to the share screen and pull up the PowerPoint, and we'll continue on. This is West Hills College Lemoore, Spring 20, Small Group Communication. Okay, so there we were. We had left off at, we were talking about individualism versus collectivism. And we left off with low context versus high context. And so let me review. I know we talked about this in class as well. So individualism, the culture privileges the individual over the group. And the United States is a good example of that society. Our laws are written, how people are treated as individuals instead of like the family they come from. Oftentimes we think about culture, right, because it's beliefs, values, so we value the individual over the group, and collectivist cultures, they value the group, the family, the community that you come from is more important than necessarily the needs of the individual. When we're looking at low context culture or high context culture, high context culture is a culture that values the atmosphere and the setting and the ritual and objects and the nonverbal part of culture. Okay, the things that aren't stated through verbal communication, but the unstated things. Okay, so and a good example would be how in Asian cultures, usually in American cultures and even Western European cultures, there's a handshake, right? A handshake and saying hello. The handshake is accompanied with the hello. It's not just a handshake. It's like an eye contact handshake and a greeting of some sort. But in like Japanese culture, people bow, right? So there's more focus on how someone behaves, and the whole, like maybe in Asian cultures, like where you sit, how your gaze and how you look at someone, a person in authority, you're not supposed to like look at them straight in the eye. So the focus on and high context culture means all those nonverbal things, the atmosphere, the setting, communicates something to the people within that culture. So when you violate that, that's how you know that something's wrong. But in cultures that have high context, meaning that setting and the nonverbal communication is really important, and following those kinds of codes and rules and values, as opposed to in American culture, when you think about how in the United States, how we communicate is verbally, right? We give directions verbally. Probably one of the harder things for us to do in doing this whole Zoom thing is that we are a face-to-face kind of verbal communication society. We're not nonverbal. I mean, we do, but most things are accompanied with verbal communication, just like I gave you the example of the high context. So low context society, we will pay more attention to what's being said, how it's being said, okay, versus the setting. Now, a really good example of this for you would be, and I forgot to time myself, so I'm going to keep this not too long. The good example would be that, I just slipped my mind. A good example in low context culture is what we wear. So let's just think about like how in some Middle Eastern cultures, if someone is a practicing Muslim and a woman might wear a burqa or hijab, or men dress a certain way in like Saudi Arabia, you know, and part of that clothing also has to do with their climate, right? But also sometimes that clothing represents like their culture and who they are, and the clothing is a part of that. Now in the United States, you could be from any, like pretty much like any socioeconomic, within reason, income bracket, and wear anything. Like you can't always tell, like we have the saying, you can't judge a book by its cover. But even when you think about that, we can't always tell, like we can't know what someone's about just because of necessarily, we can guess of where they live, how they dress, what kind of car they drive. That's not necessarily how we know things about people or how things are communicated. We really rely on how someone, like knowing them, talking to them. So we put more value on that than we do on the setting. I hope that makes sense. But really understanding those two different things. Oftentimes in collectivist cultures, there's more high context communication, okay? Not always, but oftentimes. And oftentimes in individualistic cultures, there's more focus on low context communication. Okay, let's move on. So looking at culture differences, we talked about this too: race and ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, culture differences in terms of, in a culture, of how people of different ages are treated. Are your elders, in a lot of cultures, elders are the most wise people. I would not say that in American cultures. We definitely value youth above anything, which is interesting because in a lot of other cultures, it's the elders that are valued. So there's all kinds of ways that none of them are right or wrong. It's just how a culture proceeds, and the way they behave, and the way, what they believe and what they value. It's just different. It's variations. There's that word variations again. This is a great video if you guys are interested in. It's called Why Do You Choose to Be Straight? This video is entertaining because it asks a question. There's a man that walks up to people of various different, all kinds of different people. And one of the questions, if you're a gay person or part of the LGBTQ group, is always asked, well, when did you know you were gay? Or when did you choose to be gay? And so this man takes on this idea of, well, when did you choose to be straight? And it comes out of this idea of, you know, the majority of people on this planet are heterosexual, okay? So the percentage of gay, bi, trans, lesbian people, queer people is small. I think it's getting bigger because people have been allowed to explore that as a possible orientation. But it's small in comparison to heterosexual as an orientation. So we make an assumption too that most people are heterosexual. So with that assumption comes this idea that what's not normal is abnormal. And so that's where that comes from. I think that this man, is his approach is like saying, well, there's this idea that people choose to be a certain way. Well, maybe they didn't choose. Maybe that's just who they are. Okay. Moving on. So learning styles. Let's talk about different learning styles. And I'm going to check on my time for a second. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I just want to see what the time is on the video. And actually, I'm going to pause recording for a minute. I'll be right back. Okay, we're going to continue on. I'm going to come back to the share screen and let's talk about learning styles. We'll go on there for a few more minutes. So this is important in terms of how you, when you're thinking about your group, and everyone learns differently, right? There are people that learn what we call visual learners. They're the ones that they learn by seeing. It might be the person too that has a photographic memory, but they learn a lot by looking at something. Someone who's a kinesthetic learner is someone who learns through touching, right? That's like a hands-on person. They need to touch things. They need to have like physical experience with something. Concrete experience learner is also similar to kinesthetic, but concrete experience too is someone who actually needs to touch and kind of walk through that, what it feels like. Okay, kinesthetic means is the physical sensation, and concrete experience means they literally need to like be in that situation to really understand it. So someone who's, that's why trades, like if you're in, like you want to learn to be a mechanic, probably the people that are good at mechanics are really good at learning by actually doing and being in that situation on a car and putting things together, right? That's how they are learning. Oftentimes people that are engineers, they might really learn stuff in a heady way, but they also probably learn, if they're like a certain kind of engineer, learning how to put things together by actually being involved in it. Reflective observation. So sometimes we think that people aren't paying attention if they stand back and just kind of watch, but that's actually how someone learns. They kind of like watch what's going on and they kind of reflect about what happened, and then they kind of observe for a while and they reflect about it, and they really learn by watching. So that could be someone, you know, oftentimes I think me as a teacher too, that teachers, we forget that students can still be learning even if they're just being quiet. Maybe they have a reflective observation type learning style. So these are styles of learning that we generally have, and you might be more than one, but we often are like one more than the other. Abstract conceptualization. So that's someone who kind of likes to, like, is a thinker. It likes to really think about how to understand something. So someone who thinks about things in an abstract way, they're really good with theory, and they're really good with math, and they like really think of things in an abstract, big way. Maybe not necessarily details, but thinking of things in concept in a conceptual way is what I'm trying to say, in concepts. And potentially someone who maybe can see like the big picture kind of thing. Okay, this is the last type of learner. Someone who likes to learn, who likes to experiment. So this is a person that will jump in. I bet you this person is also the same kind of learner. They're the person, they don't read the directions. They jump in and they want to see how something works. They're just going to try it out. So that kind of goes into like the concrete experience, but active experimentation is definitely someone who says, hey, I have this idea. Let's try this out and see what happens. They're really adventurous in the way they learn, and they'll just try stuff out. So this is a person that would probably be good at science, right? They just like check. These are kind of like the innovators, right? The people that just want to figure out, how does this work? If we try this, what happens with this? And that's how they learn. Definitely. So you see some overlap between the concrete experience, kinesthetic, and active experimentation learner. You can see that they're involved in their learning. It's less about standing back and looking, that there's some kind of physical involvement. So there's overlap, but each of them has a specific way that they learn. Okay, I'm going to stop the share there. And I think I've talked about this particular part of the, I'm going to come right back. Let me just see. Yeah. Okay, so that actually going to be concluding this lecture. And the next thing that we're going to cover is talking about leadership. But that pretty much covers the review of this portion of the PowerPoint lecture about diversity in the small group. And you can also look at the material on Canvas. Have a great day. Bye.